July 28, 1945. The waters of the Kure Harbour, Japan. A diver surfaces. The sea is darkened by oil slicks and smoke. Above him, the wreck of a great battleship leans at its mooring. Two steel funnels, submerged, twisted turrets jutting upward. His breathing gear hisses cold seaweed, brushes his gloved hand. On the deck above, American carrier planes roared moments ago, then silence. He sees a massive propeller fouled by coral and rust. A shell crater gapes in the hull. Underwater, the secrets of the Imperial Japanese Navy lie hidden. And now, they are about to be exposed. By mid-1945, the war in the Pacific had reached its final chapter. The island of Okinawa had fallen. The Japanese home islands were under sustained bombardment, and the mighty First and Second Fleets of the Imperial Japanese Navy lay crippled. Kure Harbour, Hiroshima Prefecture, was the Navy's last major maritime stronghold. Battleships, carriers, cruisers, anchored within sheltered waters, heavily camouflaged, shielded by anti-aircraft defenses. For the Allies, the stakes were enormous. If Japan's great ships could still sortie from Kure, the Pacific War might prolong the invasion of the home islands, become bloodier still. Intelligence reported moored vessels, fuel stores untouched, hidden docks. The mission: penetrate the harbor, expose the fleet sink, or immobilize the ships. Then send divers and salvage teams to catalog the damage and gather intelligence. What the Japanese did not want the world to see would become visible: fuel bunkers, munitions, ships, stealthy escape routes beneath the water. This was not only a naval battle of surface warships, it was a war beneath the waves for hidden infrastructure, for truth submerged in steel and water. On 24th July 1945, Task Force 38 launched carriers and bombers against Kure, and the Seto Inland Sea Japanese ships, formerly invincible, were now anchored and vulnerable. The once proud battleship Haruna was hit and sunk at her moorings, but the ships had not moved. They still lay in the harbor. Below the waves their keels rested, their fuel bunkers cracked, their destroyers scuttled in hidden bays. The American divers arrived, mine clearance teams, salvage crews, intelligence divers. They slipped through oil-slicked waters past anti-submarine nets into the shadows of wrecked hulls, cold steel trapped crews, secret compartments. On the shore, Japanese naval officers scrambled to scatter records, to sink ships, to eliminate evidence. Their anti-aircraft guns roared. Mines exploded beneath the waves. The harbor was a death trap, yet the divers pressed on. Tension: would they surface? Alive: would the Japanese crews open fire? Would hidden explosives detonate? And in the watery darkness, they found something unexpected. Not merely wrecks, but the skeleton of an empire. Storehouses, submarines, supply lines, underwater tunnels. The war for the seas had no surface finish line. July 28th. Dawn-gray planes roar overhead. Bombs slam into decks. Water erupts. The Haruna lists. Below, the diver descends. Cold, dark, rusted. He touches a propeller blade 6 meters tall. He swims past a torpedo tube still sealed. He unrolls a hatch, sees fuel oil leaking into the sea. Explosions ripple underwater. Shrapnel rains. Divers surface, gasping. Ships burn, oil slick glistens. The Japanese fleet lies defeated in its home port, and the divers emerge with proof. When the tide receded and the guns fell silent, Kure Harbour remained a graveyard of steel and secrets. The divers had done more than sink ships. They had unveiled the hidden guts of war. The war ended with a ship at anchor not charging. The Empire's fleet did not sail its last voyage. It sank in harbor stripped of purpose. The photographs of Kure's wrecks traveled the world. The great battleships that once symbolized Japanese naval might become rusting monuments beneath waves. The diver's hand on the blade of the propeller was the hand of history itself. And in that quiet seabed, the lesson remains. War cannot hide beneath surface calm forever. The truth will find its way to daylight, or to the diver's visor. The ships sank, but the secrets surfaced. Fade to black. Days turned into weeks as the divers returned again and again to the silent harbor. Each descent revealed new wrecks, new corridors of twisted metal and shadow. They mapped the seabed, meticulously measuring hulls, identifying gun mounts, collecting fragments of machinery and documents sealed in watertight cases. What once had been symbols of power now rested motionless in the mud of defeat. The battleship Aoba lay on her side, her guns pointing uselessly into the sand. Nearby, the heavy cruiser. Tone was split open, her decks peeled back, like the skin of a rusted fruit. Inside were chart rooms, instruments, coded manuals burned half away, but still legible enough to tell the story of a navy that refused surrender until the sea swallowed it whole. On the surface, the air stank of oil and decay. The harbor waters shimmered with rainbow slicks as the summer sun rose above the shattered cranes of Kure villagers watched from the hills. Quiet faces behind broken windows. They had seen their ships leave years before, never knowing they would return as tombs. American sailors and Japanese fishermen now worked side by side, pulling wreckage, clearing mines, hauling nets of twisted iron from the depths. Each find told another fragment of truth about the empire that had dreamed of oceanic dominion and drowned in its own ambition. Farther inland, engineers studied the ruins of dry docks and shipyards. There were half-built submarines, concrete pens for suicide, torpedoes, stacks of engines never assembled. Blueprints were scattered across workshop floors, blackened by fire, but still bearing the stamp of Kure Naval Arsenal. These were the ghosts of what might have been a final defense that never left the drafting table. The Allies photographed everything, preserving the evidence that Japan had prepared to fight to the last rivet. Those images would later fill reports presented in Tokyo, in Washington, in London. Proof that the tide of the Pacific War had turned not by chance, but by overwhelming industrial power and relentless determination. By September, the occupation forces arrived. The war had ended. Hiroshima lay in ashes. Nagasaki burned, yet here in Kure, the sea itself remained alive with echoes of war. Every tide carried pieces of wreckage onto the shore. Every storm unearthed forgotten munitions. Children played near shells embedded in sand, unaware of the danger that still slept beneath their feet. The divers now worked in silence, retrieving weapons, clearing explosives, documenting wrecks for history rather than combat. For many, it was their first close look at the enemy's craftsmanship and sacrifice. They found personal effects, wallets, photos, carved wooden charms. Each discovery whispered of sailors who had believed they were protecting their homeland. The divers treated those relics with quiet respect. Months passed. Winter came to the inland sea. Frost gathered on the hulls visible at low tide. The once proud fleet was reduced to rust silhouettes against pale morning light. Yet in that desolation lay a strange peace. The war was over. The sea had taken what men built for destruction and turned it into something still and eternal. Years later, in museums across the world, black and white photographs of Kure Harbour would hang behind glass. Visitors would see the torn hulls, the divers' silhouettes, the calm surface above devastation. Few would know the smell of oil or the sound of bubbles rising through silence. But the images would speak enough. They told of courage and futility, of discovery and redemption, beneath the water's weight. Kure became a symbol not only of defeat, but of revelation. It marked the moment when technology met its own limits, when pride yielded to reality. The divers who entered that harbor did not just uncover wrecks. They recovered history itself. They showed that beneath the myths of empire and victory lies the same sea that claims all men equally. In the decades that followed, the Japanese people rebuilt the harbor, turning ruins into shipyards, again this time for peace. The scars of war remained visible in corroded anchors and barnacle-covered steel, but the water above them shimmered calm. Children fished where battleships once stood guard. Life resumed slowly, steadily. And yet, deep beneath those waves, the ghosts remained. Every diver who descended into Kure spoke of the same feeling, a pressure not only from the water, but from time itself. A weight of stories, unspoken, of lives halted mid-breath. They said the silence down there was not empty. It was full of memory, full of warning, full of the echo of engines that would never start again. When the final survey was complete, and the last report filed, the divers gathered on deck and watched the sun set over the harbor. They said nothing. They didn't need to. They knew what they had seen would never be forgotten. The sea had shown them the truth. Japan never wanted the world to see. And the truth was simple. Empires sink, but memory floats forever.